In today's biased news, climate protesters take to the streets to send a message to the UN, Ukraine's government shakeup continues amid accelerating privatization, and the US's growing labor movement continues to win concessions. Climate activists flooded the streets of Manhattan ahead of the UN General Assembly, with around 75,000 protesters from 700 organizations demanding an end to fossil fuels. They called on US President Joe Biden and global leaders to phase out fossil fuels due to their role in worsening the climate crisis. The activists emphasized the urgency of the issue, and young protesters like Emma Beretta of Fridays for Future called for action to prevent the consequences from falling on their generation. The protest coincides with the UN's warning that the 2015 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, are unlikely to be met, and the re-emphasizing of the need to eliminate fossil fuels that can't be captured or compensated to achieve net zero carbon emissions by 2050. There is no longer any debate that greenhouse gas emissions from fossil fuels dramatically worsen extreme weather events around the world. Ahead of the UN COP28 climate summit, over 80 nations aim to establish an accord to progressively eliminate coal, oil, and gas. However, some leaders from top carbon-producing nations are not participating, leaving the platform to countries pledging concrete actions. The 2030 Agenda aims to redefine global prosperity by prioritizing ecologically sustainable economic growth over income per capita. The implementation of the SDGs is closely tied to the Paris Agreement on climate change, as they promote sustainable, low-emission environments for businesses and people worldwide. According to the UN, challenges in achieving these goals have emerged due to setbacks caused by the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine. While technically true, this perspective lacks depth, completely ignoring the market economy's general trend of taking us in the wrong direction. The capitalist system doesn't account for climate impact when dictating how businesses work worldwide, leading to increased poverty, wealth inequality, food insecurity, and educational disparities. These challenges necessitate renewed urgency for the 2030 Agenda, and a more radical approach to ecologically sound reform, which could at the very least curtail our capital-driven climate disaster. However, there is skepticism among nations in the global south, who view the SDGs as insufficiently ambitious and non-binding. Many are frustrated by the failure of wealthy nations to fulfill financial commitments for climate adaptation. The SDG summit is seen as a critical test for the Secretary-General's legacy, and there is hope that diplomatic efforts will advance SDG implementation despite existing challenges. The year 2030, when these goals should be achieved, is quickly approaching, emphasizing the urgency of the global community's actions. Ukraine's cabinet of ministers has recently dismissed all 6 deputy defense ministers in Kyiv. This move follows the appointment of Rustem Umerov, a privatization hawk, as Ukraine's new defense minister on September 6th, as well as a general restructuring of the higher echelons of the Ukrainian military management. The war continues to sap the country's resources, including, most importantly, tens of thousands of lives, and the buzzards continue to circle as the foreign privatization of Ukraine accelerates. Turkish President Erdogan has asked Elon Musk to consider building a Tesla factory in Turkey during a meeting in New York. The company has expressed interest in building a factory in India, and plans to expand globally with several more. Tesla vehicles remain popular, despite Musk's own public image issues, as well as the alarmingly common occurrence of Teslas bursting into flames or randomly accelerating towards pedestrians. In today's lightning round, the US military lost a fighter jet and they're asking the public to find it, because they can't. Yes, you heard that right. Taiwan's defense ministry is saying it detected 103 Chinese warplanes in a 24-hour period. Given their proximity to the mainland, that's like the average American saying they spotted 103 McDonald's. $6 billion in Iranian funds frozen by the US have been transferred to accounts in Qatar, paving the way for a coordinated exchange of 5 detainees between Iran and the United States on Monday. China snapped back at German Foreign Minister Baerbock's characterization of President Xi as a dictator in a recent interview. Mao Ning, a ministry spokesperson, labeled Baerbock's comments an open political provocation. And finally, Ukraine's trade representative has announced that Kyiv intends to initiate legal proceedings against Poland, Hungary, and Slovakia due to their continued ban on Ukrainian agricultural products. They expressed concerns about the lack of unity within the EU, particularly regarding trade policy, due to the actions of Budapest and Warsaw in disregarding EU institutions' positions. And to end with some positive news, in the US, the United Auto Workers strike is part of a broader trend of labor activism in the United States. Workers from various sectors, including Hollywood writers, nurses, factory workers, and Starbucks baristas, have gone on strike in recent months to demand higher pay, improved benefits, and better working conditions. This increase in labor activism is a response to decades of stagnant wages for workers, coupled with a significant wealth accumulation among the richest Americans. Corporate profits have surged, especially during the pandemic, leading workers to demand a more equitable share of the profits, as they are the ones who not only do all the work, but who also take on all the risk of working during a health crisis. Several core features of capitalism, including deregulation, declining union influence, and a stagnant federal minimum wage, have contributed to wage disparities. Workers are emboldened by a tight labor market and strong public support for unions, which have gained more bargaining power in recent years. However, despite the recent surge in strikes, the US still experiences 70% fewer strikes compared to the early 70s. Union membership has declined, partly due to the right-to-work laws that discourage union participation. Many companies also aggressively oppose unionization efforts. That being said, the recent wave of large and well-coordinated strikes leaves plenty of room for optimism, as it appears the American working class is finally relearning the language of militant labor. That's all for today. We'll be back day after tomorrow with more news. If you'd like to see longer episodes with more in-depth analysis, consider becoming a patron so we can grow and expand.